Good. Well, John, it's great to be able to welcome you to just find out a little bit about the work that you do and the work of the Salvation Army. I'm sure people all around the country will have heard of the Salvation Army and seen what they do, but this is an opportunity over the next few minutes to just talk through that and your work with them. So I suppose that's probably a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about the background of the Salvation Army, its
So we,
history.
yes, thank you, Colin. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's wonderful to be able to give a bit of a glimpse into perhaps what we don't know, what I didn't know about the Salvation Army. So we started life in 1865 in the East End of London. Most people will probably be familiar with Catherine and William Booth. Who were extraordinary characters, and the legacy lived on with their own children and through many others. So over 150 years of history, an organisation that saw, well, I suppose we live by our mission, which is to save souls, grow saints, and serve suffering humanity. And often that actually works very much the other way around. What William and Catherine could see was incredible need. And actually, whilst society looks very different today, the needs have changed, but actually we still see the same sort of fundamental need. So we're an organization that is about the individual. It's about what is an individual person's real need, and often that people will start from a place that the need that we can see. A classic one would be homelessness. So somebody might come to one of our centres, or we may be connected with someone who's sleeping rough. So that's the sort of starting point, and the next layer behind that situation. And by the way, one of the things we find really important is never to label people. So we won't describe someone as homeless. We will describe someone, and they may be in a situation of homelessness. And we find it's ever so important where you start and how people see themselves. Their identity is critical. So we will never identify them as characterized by homelessness or addictions or whatever that might be. What we want people to discover is the person they really are. And often behind these layers that might start with homelessness, behind that might be addictions or plain hunger and health issues. Behind those will often be broken relationships, and behind that is a tremendous lack of self-worth and self-belief and sense of any value in someone's value of themselves. Behind that will often be deep-rooted, perhaps, in fact, frighteningly often, childhood trauma of one sort or another. And what we are in an almost unique position to be able to do is help people, no matter which way that goes and how deep someone chooses to want to go. So we don't just help someone who finds themselves in a position where they're homeless. So we help them through that to the next thing that they want or may not want to address. And whatever that looks like, we work through. So it never gets to a stage of, well, I can't help you with that. You know,
So are these all services that you offer, the ones
yes,
that you refer to? So
yes,
even down
absolutely.
to the trauma counselling and so
Well,
on?
once it gets to deep psychological trauma, we will journey with them as they engage health professionals for that
Right.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
We're very careful to know where those boundaries lie. But if something translates to just a desperate need for a job, or debt, or addictions, or broken family relationships, and what it really needs is someone that can help. It sometimes help just find family. We run a family tracing service that helps people, but it's not a case of, well, we found them, here's their contact details, good luck with that, because you could do more harm than good. So what we're about is what does the mediation and how do we connect people, and what does that look like, and what's the rest of that journey look like. We have an enormous diversity to what we do. So we actually hold the Home Office contract for what they call the National Referral Mechanism, but it's basically when people are victims of modern slavery or human trafficking, the first place they come after the police rescue them or do a raid or identify them, their first place is the Salvation Army, where we run safe houses and give them all the things they need, whatever that might be, and help them to access legal services and healthcare services and so on, and journey with them through the rest of that. Through to, we help people in the whole spectrum of life. So from pre-birth, in potential parents who might have a difficult home situation, the single mother or the single parent that just needs that bit of help because otherwise they're at risk, through to people who are bereaved and need help with that. Their soulmate has gone and suddenly their world is imploding, and we know what does that mean? How on earth am I going to make my way through life now without that person? I remember meeting an extraordinary lady, ironically, in the East End of London, and she'd got her life back together now. We could call her Katrina, but she now works in a cafe at the Salvation Army, where she's the first person you meet at this particular Salvation Army centre. But 25 years ago, she was waiting just outside to the registry office to get married to her husband. She watched him cross the road down the street, and as he crossed the road, he was run over by a drunk driver. She rushed over and he literally died in her arms. She was 7 months pregnant with their child to be, and she lost the baby and her life fell apart. She became homeless. She became a desperate person. She turned to various things, addictions and so on. It just became a mess. She tried to commit suicide twice. And she found herself bumping into the Salvation Army, and she found somewhere where she could be just accepted, and someone where she could find family, and she was able to just gradually, with us journeying with her, put her life back together. And life is very different now, and she plays an extraordinarily important life in the role of that Salvation Army in a community.
Yeah, fantastic. How did you become involved with the Salvation Army then yourself? Obviously, you've had some experience in the East End from what you were saying, but how did you get to where you are now, I suppose?
Yeah, I'd spent probably most of my career, I might not look it, but I'm the other side of 50. So I spent most of my career in the corporate sector, working in IT businesses. And whilst it was okay, and I worked for perfectly honourable, ethical firms, ultimately what I felt increasingly disappointed by or unsatisfied by was these businesses exist purely to make money. That's their purpose, and that's what business is for. That's fine. But they had no greater sense of purpose than that. And so I really wanted to find an organization, work for an organization that had a different, a higher purpose and calling, something that, where obviously to any organization, to any of us, we can't live life without money, unfortunately. But money for the Salvation Army is the means to an end. It's not the end in itself. And so I've worked for a couple of different charities, and just I could never kind of find myself really going back, I don't think. So
what did you join to do? What was your first role at the Salvation Army?
Yeah, I guess I work in a team that are about partnerships probably would be the best way to describe it. So the Salvation Army is a network of communities and relationships, and some of those are the people that help to make the Salvation Army's work possible. Their role, the best part that they can play in the kind of impacting and seeing communities supported and transformed, is by donating and giving and resourcing, and that's the best thing that they can do. So I help to make that possible with individuals and businesses.
Right, okay. And so how have the last few months impacted the Salvation Army, obviously with everything that's started to unravel in communities and in the economy and so on? What are the resources that you're finding people are calling on?
Yes, absolutely. It has been dramatic. And in case anybody watching this is a bit worried that one of the changes is a change to our uniform, it's not. This is not the new Salvation Army uniform. It's what I get to wear because I'm not going into the office. The reality, the reality of the world we're in now is the fundamental needs people haven't radically changed at the deepest sense. But people are going through very different situations right now, and that's translated in all sorts of ways. So throughout, we've had to change how we deliver what we do. So we've seen a massive growth in the need for food parcels, food banks, food support. We had an extraordinary situation in Scotland. We came across a man, 94 years old, and he hadn't eaten for 5 days. It's incredible what can happen in these situations. So we've run a national network of providing food, the classic food parcel, that's the staples that people can collect if they're referred to us because they're in need, through to delivering hot meals to people and just helping on the doorstep by delivering these, obviously within the guidance and all the rules of distancing and so on. So that's been the biggest area. We've continued to run our Employment Plus service, but we've done it remotely, so helping people to look for and equip them to be more successful in their job hunting, debt advice services running remotely, and so on. And we're now looking at what this gradual transition back to a new normal might look like, and how we scale up and deliver services in line.
But that's likely to mean a bit of a change to how you deliver things, at least in the short term.
Yes.
Yeah. But absolutely. Food banks and so on sound as though they're the most immediate need.
Yes, that's right.
Heard. What about income? Because one of the issues that we are hearing from a lot of charitable causes and trusts is that really has been under some strain.
Yes, absolutely, and we're finding exactly the same. We had the good news was we had some reasonably generous response to our crisis appeal, so that we could resource this enormous scaling up of food provision. But at the same time, we are facing into a very uncertain future. So the everyday fundamental community centre, rooted in and serving communities, Salvation Army, the day in, day out, those centres that people turn to because they've got nowhere else to go, our ability to sustain that will depend on the resources that we have to make that possible. So that's what we have a great deal of, well, it's just a huge unknown. We've had to make substantial cuts to whatever we can trim that doesn't fundamentally jeopardize our ability to deliver services. So economize in every way, shape or form. But at the same time, we still don't really know what the rest of this year and beyond will actually look like, in the same way that most people don't. But I suppose if anybody has the ability to support us, then that can make a world of difference to our ability to to make a tremendous difference to people's lives.
And at the moment, is it still the provision of food that's still the primary need that you're needing to address?
We expect that to continue for some time, because as people have found themselves squeezed, then a lot of people were living very close to the edge already. So our ability to support them with fundamentals is critical. I think what we're beginning to see is a growth in the demand for things like debt advice services, the Employment Plus service, inevitably, because there's going to be, as we come out of furloughing, there'll be, unfortunately, inevitable consequences. We're expecting huge demand in that. We could well see tremendous, and we don't know, but we could well see tremendous growth in people who find themselves rough sleeping or find themselves in a situation of homelessness, and how we will need to be able to build up a service around that. We might be enjoying reasonably good weather right now, but it'll only be months, and the country that will find ourselves in a very different place, and the need to be able to help people through that. There's probably going to be all sorts of people find themselves quite lonely and even more lonely and isolated, ironically, as the world moves into a more new normal, and people go out and live their lives a little bit more. Those older people, or people who we might have just taken a little bit more of interest in our communities, are going to feel that much more possibly isolated. So it's very diverse, and we react to whatever need there is out there, but we can't be certain what that will look like any more than anybody else can be certain about what the future holds.
Yeah. So what would you be looking for in terms of support at the moment? Is financially? Is it time? Can people volunteer? Where do you get all that resource from, and what can people do to support you?
Yes, I guess ordinarily the local Salvation Army would have a level of need for volunteering, but that comes, obviously, at the moment, we've got huge challenges with that. We can't operate in the normal way, so there isn't quite the demand for that right now, unfortunately. There will be some, but it's not quite the same. I guess if people find themselves in a position where they could put a little bit of time into making things possible, then we'd be delighted if people took advantage of all the things we have to offer around how they could fundraise for the Salvation Army. They might get involved in virtual or actual events, or do all manner of things like that, or whatever creative ways they can find. But if you go to our website, you'll find ready-made suggestions for how you could fundraise. Equally, if people find themselves in a position where they could give, then that would be amazing. Regular giving especially makes a world of difference to us. Or they might suggest that they have relationships they know of others that they could recommend, and they could connect to us, and we'd welcome that too. So it's a whole range of those sorts of things. And also, just as a side point, we're seeing our charity shops reopening, and so people could go there too. But I guess we're huge believers in the parable of the widow's mite. If someone is in a position to give a few pounds, we see that with exactly the same value as somebody who can give a few £1,000, and that makes a world of difference. We actually survive on the basis of the enormous numbers of public generosity, and the vast majority of that is quite modest, but makes an enormous impact on communities in this country and beyond.
That's really great. Thank you very much, John. Thanks for telling us about the work of the Salvation Army across the UK. But the difference that you're making in towns and villages across our parts of the country as well.
Well, thank you, Colin and King's Fleet Wealth, for the opportunity to talk to you and your amazing customers. If anybody would like to get in touch, then please go to our website, or if you'd like to connect with me specifically, then perhaps get in touch with Colin. And
Be happy to pass it on.
thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
No, thank you, John.